I'm Fei Kwan, and you're tuned into It's About Youth, where we speak to the younger generation on the issues that matter to them. Now, the United Nations has declared clean air as a basic human right. However, it's common for Malaysians to live through seasonal air pollution, with the haze being a recurring environmental issue that has plagued the country for several decades. While we've experienced relatively clear skies over the course of the pandemic, the haze and the hot and dry weather season is back upon us again. What's being done in the fight for cleaner air in the country? Joining me on the show is Heng Kiah Chun, the Regional Campaign Strategist of Greenpeace Southeast Asia, as well as Ernest Zacharevic, an artist. Thank you for joining me on the show. Yeah. Well, okay, as mentioned, the haze is a recurring issue. We've seen it happening. It's almost known as an annual phenomenon. And the blame is often placed on our neighboring countries. But Kiah Chun, maybe could you elaborate a bit on what are some of the underlying factors that actually contribute to transboundary haze?
Okay, maybe I can just talk about like what causes haze. In Southeast Asia, most of the haze are caused by the peatland destructions and forest fire, and there are local peat fire in Malaysia and also the peat fire in Indonesia and in other countries. For example, the recent transboundary haze are mainly caused by the like the monocrops, mono-agriculture practices in Thailand and other neighboring countries. And because of the wind directions, they also came to Malaysia. If you look at the news recently, there are also some peat fire happened in Bachok, Kelantan, and also Terengganu. So peat fire is not just happen in Indonesia, but it's also across a Southeast Asian country. So transboundary haze are mostly caused by the peatland destructions. Yeah, that is the situations right now.
Mm-hmm. And the both of you are working on an upcoming art activism exhibition that will be highlighting this, right? It's to call for demand. It's to demand for action to protect our right to clean air. But even though this is an upcoming exhibition this weekend, I understand that this has actually been going on for quite a while now, with murals and posters being plastered around Kuala Lumpur and Penang since last year. Could you tell me a little bit more about the process leading up to the event? Ernest, let's start with you.
So myself and Heng, we started collaborating on this issue exactly about a year ago. About a year ago now, we decided to join our forces to sort of bring this issue up to the public once again and remind people, that it did not go anywhere yet. And myself, I started curating a project called Splash and Burn, and inspired by the very bad haze year in 2015. So that was the moment when I got sort of interested in the issue, and that caught my attention, and I started researching why it is so bad, and why we're breathing this air. Myself as an artist, I work outside, I work in the streets, I paint murals, and it's something, I cannot avoid not seeing, as well as having conversations with people who come by and see me, So I kept asking everyone, and nobody seemed to be a very definite answer of where is haze coming from. That 1997 was a terrible year in Malaysia, and 2008 was a terrible year, and 2015, and this issue, every time it comes back, it seems to be worse and worse, So I decided, to sort of dedicate some of my time and some of my artwork, to this theme. That sort of led us to years later to meet with Heng and address this issue together. So we started off public campaigning with murals and artworks in the streets, just bringing people's attention to the issue once again. And it slowly, escalated and evolved into making a short film, that we wanted to present somewhere to public and do a premiere of, that grew into this event, which is going to be a Haze Coming Soon exhibition, which opens this Friday. Yeah.
Very exciting. Heng, is there anything you can add on to this?
Maybe I can talk more about what is peat fire, because peat in Southeast Asia, most of the forest fire, haze and forest fire are caused by the peatland destructions. And peat fire is actually peatland naturally are waterlogged, which means that contains lots of water. When peatlands, has drains for the plantations, and then a lot of water has been removed, which means that the peatland that has been drained are vulnerable to fire. So if you look at that, in Sumatra, in Kalimantan, in some parts of Malaysia, there are lots of peatland. When the peatland has been destroyed for unsustainable practices, then it turned the more fire, and more fire means that more smoke and more haze pollutions. That's the situation right now, and we need to restore peatland and protect peatland.
And that's something that's very important for the people to know about, right? The causes of what's contributing to something that's potentially a health hazard for them, like Ernest, when you're working outdoors, or other construction workers outdoors. Have there been any challenges that you faced when it came to raising awareness regarding this haze phenomenon, Ernest?
I think the biggest challenge that I found is this issue is very obvious to people when the haze is here. Then you can't see your, city line, horizon, then it's foggy, then you can't breathe, and your parents are coughing. This is a very obvious issue. This becomes very sort of an emergency for people. But for that to happen, it has to be a lot of factors in place. It has to be a very dry year. It has to be a wind in a certain direction, an absence of rain, and many, many other factors. And it seemed to be that the issue makes into a media only when these all factors combine and reach Kuala Lumpur, then it reaches Singapore, especially Singapore. If Singapore is choking, then it goes international, and everyone's concerned, because we all have banks there. But I think the problem, the monster we're dealing with here is not the smoke itself. It's not the haze. There is no smoke without the fire. And the fire, the issues that Heng is talking about, is the actual, core issues that do not go away with the rain. They do not go away with the season. And sometimes, so in a good year, we will see politicians in the media taking the stone like, we solved it. Finally, this is over. There is no haze this year, and that is that sort of translates to people very easily, and people tend to forget about it. People tend to put that issue on a side, until the next time they have to worry. But what we're facing here, every time these circumstances collide, is once every 5 to 10 years. And every time it comes back stronger, because every time we have more and more plantations and less forest. And forest and peatland is something we crucially need to filter the air which is being polluted. And if we have less filter and more pollution, it sort of tends to escalating catastrophe. So that issue of not seeing the issue and not seeing the problem, and people sort of out of sight, out of mind mentality, is something that is very important for us to address, and one of the biggest issues. Even right now, like we find our exhibition fall very timely with, haze coming from Thailand for the last couple of weeks, and everyone seemed to, applaud how relevant and, it is right now. But we get comments, and sometimes when we do artwork and there is no haze, and there hasn't been a haze for half a year, and there is not likely to be any. People like, oh, but why we should worry about it now? Because if we don't worry about it now, it's going to be a big issue later. So this is something that we over and over try to communicate to public.
I think you're right. When it's not seen, people don't really talk about it until the haze season comes back, and then it's a big conversation again. The issue really is lack of inaction, isn't it, or finding long-term solutions to it, which I'd like to delve into. But as you said, your exhibition is very timely, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit. What do you think, how does art play a role when it comes to inspiring action and change regarding this issue? Kiah Chun, should start with you.
Maybe I can talk about like art. Art actually is part of the agents of change, because sometimes when we encounter all these very complicated issues, we also need something to visualize it. That's why we engage with all these artists like Ernest to translate all these complicated message, scientific complicated messages, into simple message, which means that for all the member of public, when they look at the mural, look at the artwork, they can know what is the problem happening right now and what they can do. Because showing the graphics, the artwork, it can lead people to start to rethink what is happening right now, and they might also think that, okay, I need to take actions, and how to take actions, and then we can refer to the reports that we have published, and then that is the solutions that we want to promote, and it will make more people understand what is the root cause and what is the solutions that we can work on.
So right, for people to be able to visualize the
Yes.
problem, right? Ernest, anything to add on?
I do think that solutions to these issues are very scientific first, and then political second, and there's a lot of economical aspects that come into it, and for majority of the public this is a process that they don't really want to think about. Like not everyone wants to read scientific papers and research, and write petitions, and so on and so forth. But art is something that can communicate that to public very, as Heng said, in a very obviously and in an understandable language, directly to everyone, and where people can relate to it. Art is something that cannot be described in numbers. It cannot be described in statistics. It's a very personal, it's very emotional thing, and I think it touches people in a way that like other media cannot. So I think it's very important to have these like creative ways to this conversation and to this issue, and to make people relate to the issue, rather than throwing numbers at them and policies and saying we need this, we need that. For a regular person, there's not many policies they can take. They just have to relate to it, understand how, make them think and make them inspired in the first place, I think, to how can they change their life or change the environment and contribute to something that would benefit, issue and the problems that, serve as, use their platform and their work wherever they are and whatever it is as a marker to change.
Oh, that's great. So really tying in the relationship between art and activism in the context of environmental issues, right? For artists to be able to use their platform to raise awareness for things such as this. We'll discuss about that further, but first let's go for a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back to It's About Youth, where today we're discussing the haze pollution with Heng Kiah Chun, the regional campaign strategist of Greenpeace Southeast Asia, as well as Ernest Zacharevic, an artist. Previously we touched a little bit on the underlying factors of the haze and what's contributing to it. And the both of them are working on an exhibition, Haze, known as Haze Coming Soon, one part of which will feature a panel discussion on the pollution and creative activism. Ernest, how crucial is it really for us to have such spaces like this when it comes to raising awareness on environmental issues and to have creatives at the center of it?
I think it is very, very important because as many people know, especially here in Malaysia, this is a very complicated issue. It has so many factors affecting it, and the approach is not just black and white to it. So we need to have very creative discussion too. The ideas that are going to solve this issue are going to be creative. So we do need to have different angles of the conversation regarding this issue and different opinions and ideas and minds to contributing to it. There's not single solution that is going to solve it. It's an effort of all. So I think most importantly is to inspire everyone to propose, suggest, act on their own terms. Do what they can to sort of get everyone out of this.
And on that note, really, what do you think is the value of having youths on the table? So what's the value of youth advocacy when it comes to demanding for clean air? Heng?
I think in the futures, I would say that clean air became a luxury in the future. I mean, unfortunately to say that, because like if we look at our parents' time, great-grandparents' time, if we open the window, you can enjoy a fresh air. But now, because of the, I think, more polluted air, so getting a fresh air is very hard, and especially for younger generations, that the thing that I can't even get, I mean, in order to enjoy fresh air, some people have to buy air purifier. So which means like only rich people can afford to enjoy the clean air, temporarily clean air. And in the future, because of all this increased climate disaster, the youth also tend to have more climate anxiety because they worry about the future. So the way that we can do is like all the younger generations that can also stand up together, and then they say to tell to the policymaker that I want to demand a clean air society, and clean air is a basic human right.
As it is, I think our school children now their studies are being affected as it is. For those in areas where the air pollution index is above, the reading is above 100, they're not allowed to go outdoors, and that really affects their childhood and their education experience, right? Ernest, what do you have to say? Would you agree with me?
I totally agree, and I would like to add that, you know, young people are crucial for any kind of change. Anything, as we are kids, especially at teenage years, as we grow up, we are sponge, we absorb everything. The ideas stick to us for life, you know. What inspires us as teenagers stays with us, and the values that we teach to our younger generation are going to be the values that we're going to see in a change in the world later. You know, they are kids now, they are students now, or they, you know, they missed a day of school or they missed a week of school. But, you know, take 10, 20, 30 years from now, they're going to be our politicians, they're going to be our presidents, they're going to be our policymakers. And, you know, if they care about these issues now, they're going to act on it later. And, you know, sometimes in some countries, I'm not particularly pointing out at any country or any politician in particular, but some generations are grown without that concern, you know. They spend their life without having to worry about the haze or deforestation or issues like that. So then they come to a position of power, they do not take this into consideration. So we want to grow a generation who's considerate of that, a generation who's you know, aware, conscious, educated about these issues, and capable and able to act on it.
An education that's aware and able to act on climate justice, right? To push
Yes,
for climate
that's correct.
justice today. Well, I want to talk solutions now. During haze season, the solution often is always to blast out messages for the people to take care of it themselves, whether it comes to taking care of your health or closing your windows so that you don't expose yourself to the haze, right? But it's always that rather than tackling the root cause. Heng, what sort of long-term solutions do you think the government should look into to really hold firms accountable for any environmental misconduct in the region?
Yeah, because haze pollution is caused by the peatland destructions, and then cause peat fire. So if we were to tackle the root cause of this peat fire, then we should protect peatland. Protect peatlands means like don't destroy forests. At the same time, reflood peatlands. So which means like reflood, restore, and total protections of peatland is a solution. But how do we do it? So now we also have to tackle it from the supply chain management. That's why a lot of the company, especially from the financial institutions, from the trader, the agricultural businesses, they all have a policy known as NDPE, no deforestation, no peat, no exploitation, which means that in the future, by having this policy, there shouldn't have a new developments on the peat, and also showcase the best practices in the forest management, forest and peatland management. And after we found that in our few years investigations, we found that not all the company enforce it. That's why the problem are still happening. So that's why the governments should also regulate it, which means that make sure all these company, including the financial institutions, banker, they also have to walk the talk. They have to regulate, make sure their company, their trader, and also their supplier are implementing this policy so that it can solve the root cause of the fire.
So going after the big corporates in a way. One thing is that Malaysia will be meeting other ASEAN countries in the region to address the transboundary haze issue next month. What do you think should be on their agenda?
From my side, I think that the government should have propose a domestic transboundary haze law. This is because governments say that the Southeast Asian countries should use ASEAN way, which is a diplomatic way to solve the root cause of transboundary haze. And this is a good way. And if we look at that, transboundary haze happened for many years. And we want to highlight that diplomatic ways can coexist with the domestic law, which means that in the futures, the governments can also should enact a law, a local transboundary haze law that hold the local company to account. For example, I understand that ASEAN, they have agreements that no interference, which means that Malaysians will not interfere what happens in Indonesia, Indonesia will not interfere what happened in Singapore. So we can still use the diplomatic to do it. So the message should be Malaysian company shouldn't cause problem in Malaysia and also outside Malaysia. For example, there are a few Malaysian companies that were highlighted a few years back that they are having this, that cause some trouble. So the governments can also have this law to make sure that we have to regulate it. So once the governments regulate it, this also have a good platform and good opportunity to prove that Malaysian company are protecting forests and not causing forest fire.
I think that's one thing that's very important to note, the fact that Malaysian companies are contributing to the haze outside of Malaysia as well. But unfortunately, we know that the Transboundary Haze Act was shelved in 2020. But beyond the government then, how can individuals and communities be empowered to take action on the haze? And perhaps what are some of the most effective ways for people to try to make a difference? Ernest, can we start with you?
Okay, I start first.
Yeah.
And I mean, what people can do is, the message is we need to protect peatland, protect forests, don't destroy forests. Second one, as a consumer, as a customer, as a citizens, we have a duty to also monitor what the policymakers are doing. For example, we can also monitor what our member parliament are doing in their parliament. For example, in the next parliamentary the sittings, it's time for governments to start to, especially the policymaker, to start to discuss about having a domestic transboundary haze law. For example, the government using the diplomatic way to solve this problem, and this is not enough. Why not give transboundary law a chance? And then by having this law, maybe it's not perfect, but having an imperfect law is better than no law at all. Then having this kind of approach maybe can start to clean up the supply chain, and then after that, it will also put the bad apple under the spotlight. This also good for those companies who are making commitment to protect forests.
And Ernest?
On my behalf, I think I would have to say it's always a very difficult question, that we say, what can we do? What can we do? And what I think there is no single answer that applies to every person. But what I see, is a big taboo in Malaysia of the palm oil conversation, of the plantations conversation, and everyone sees like as a black and white issue, like people choose their side, they pro this or pro that. But I think, it's, as we mentioned before, it's a very complex issue, and Malaysia relies, and every citizen in Malaysia relies one way or another on the industry, on the exports of palm oil as well. And many of us and many Malaysians are directly or have relatives, a family who are directly involved in the industry or in the companies who make difference, or in political parties that make difference, And if we look at our background, if you look at our environment and our families and our own job, a lot of people work in the banks and they don't think about it. What does my bank do? Do we contribute to the issue, or do we help solve it? And just asking these questions, where you place yourself in the perspective of this issue, in this landscape, and what role do you play and what change can you do is, I think, very important. And, not seeing it as they said, as a black and white issue. There is a lot of positive and negative aspects. There are two sides of the medal, let's say so. And as Heng explained, very extensively, like there are activities within the industry which shouldn't be done, and we have to understand that they're only done for an economical benefit. People develop peatlands just because the crop yield is much higher than developing anywhere else. It doesn't mean that they can't develop anywhere else. It's just they'll get more money if they develop on a peatland. But it comes at the expense of the population, and we all pay the price. So we all have to look, like, do we contribute to it? Do we help to solve it? And how can we solve it?
So starting the conversations and really getting people to think about
That's
their
correct.
actions and the consequences of
That's
their
correct.
actions, right? Well, we have a little bit of time before we wrap up. Any last words from either of you?
I would like to invite everyone to the exhibition opening tonight. He's coming soon, and Rex KL. Come visit, get inspired, look at see some artwork, talk to people at the exhibition, get inspired. Hopefully you'll be entertained and inspired to act on the change in the way you can.
All right, and Heng?
Yeah, maybe it's like stopping forest fire and stopping air pollution is part of the main agenda in the International Climate Change Agreement. Because if we do not stop forest fire, if we do not stop air pollution, we cannot stop climate change. So join us in this campaign to highlight that clean air is a basic human right. We have a campaign currently known as Takna Jerobu and also Clean Air for All. So we need everyone to join us and take actions together to say Takna Jerobu, Clean Air for All.
And there you go. Let's do our part to protect our right to clean air. Thank you so much, Heng and Ernest, for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
You've been watching It's About Youth with me, Fei Kwan. See you next time.